Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Great little show on the deck today. We got plenty of news to discuss. Also, some RB superlatives with a very special guest, the voice of the Fantasy Life newsletter and creative lead of Fantasy Life, all around cool guy, Peter Overzet. What's going on, Pete?
Doing good, man. You know, I love these early morning shows. We get the coffee rolling. And I would say yesterday was one of the more fun news days in the fantasy space, too. So let's get the coffee going and let's sift through some news here and dish out some awards.
You heard the man. News. Let's get it. Freaking love coming in hot with that. It's a great day to be great, everybody. And as Pete said, we do have quite a bit of news to get down. I love when the beat reporters recognize what their job is. And I know they have hard jobs and they got to service the real life fans. But for our purposes, we want these fantasy roster updates. And we got some good ones, notably from Broncos ace beat reporter Benjamin Albright. Pete, intel on this wide receiver room. Now, I don't know about you, but I have been making a habit of giving Marvin Mims a second chance after a bust of a rookie year, and it seems like he will be getting just that. Per Benjamin Albright, we are expected to see Marvin Mims as the starting Z in this Broncos offense, flanked by Courtland Sutton as well as Josh Reynolds. Bad news, though, for Troy Franklin, who Albright says could actually be the wide receiver 6 on this squad with our one true, wide receiver 1, Tim Patrick. I'm just kidding. I enjoy Tim Patrick. Tim Patrick expected to be the wide receiver 4 is the moral of the story. So overall thoughts on this, Pete, because for drafts like going on all summer, Franklin's actually been going ahead of Marvin Mims. Now it sounds like he might not even be a rotational player once we actually start playing football here in a few short weeks.
Yeah, I was very interested in this report because Mims and Franklin have both been targets for me. I have been taking Franklin ahead of him just because the ADP kind of dictates that. My favorite move is honestly to get both of them because I think the cost is so cheap and I think there is going to be a winner between these two. So my processing this report, I want to go in two directions. Like on the one hand, it is really concerning for Franklin because we saw what happened to Marvin Mims last year. Sean Payton, despite trading up to get the guy, basically put him on the bench, said, hey, I don't have a role for you. Jerry Jeudy's still here. He had so little playing time in year one. If Troy Franklin is on that same trajectory, that's a concern. On the other hand, it's like Troy Franklin fell to the 4th round of the NFL draft. A lot of teams passed on him. It's to be expected that he's not going to be the most polished or the best wide receiver in the room, and that a veteran like Josh Reynolds is going to look better than him right now. So I'm kind of trying to balance those two things. I want to pump the brakes a little bit on Troy Franklin, but when I draft him, I know it's for the final 4 or 5 weeks of the season. It's not to get out to a fast start.
Troy Franklin, 6'2", 176. And if you listen to any of Sean Payton's press conferences, can't go more than a day without talking about wanting some more size in his wide receiver room. So as Pete said, we're playing for, week 16, week 17, not necessarily week 1. So not time to completely press the panic button, but at the same time, not necessarily ideal. Obviously is linking up with Bo Nix. And we've seen, a steady stream of kind of just former collegiate teammates find some, not newfound, but continued success when playing together in the NFL. I guess the next question then becomes how much to exactly expect out of Bo Nix if he's going to be under center, because some of the words out of camp are that actually Jarrett Stidham has been the best Broncos quarterback so far. So Pete, we've had kind of like DraftKings and just Vegas odds in general on the quarterback competitions. Bo Nix remains the heavy favorite to start in week 1. I expect him to do so, but next question is, should we really be expecting this to be anything other than a fairly horrific NFL offense? I mean, if you do take the Vegas implied point totals from every team, only the Panthers and Patriots actually project to score fewer points than the Broncos this year. So I hear you. Don't hate the player, hate the ADP, and all these guys are super cheap. But what are the chances that the idea of, which Broncos players should we be drafting is actually just no?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this in the newsletter the other day, writing about the Broncos backfield, and I think the range of outcomes here in Denver is super wide because you can squint and tell yourself stories of, hey, Sean Payton, we've talked a lot about how his offense has generated a ton of points to the running back position. We have this super ambiguous backfield. We have a new hand-picked quarterback by Sean Payton in Bo Nix. You can squint and say, can he try to run the Drew Brees offense he had in New Orleans? Lots of checkdowns. to these backs. Both McLaughlin, Javonte Williams can catch the ball. Audric Esme apparently is having a good camp. And same with the wide receivers. I can tell myself stories where these guys are all so cheap. Bo Nix is free in draft. The receivers we just mentioned, Javonte Williams goes after pick 110 in most drafts. So they don't have to necessarily be a world-beating team to pay off their ADP. But to your point, it's also well within the range of outcomes that they bottom out, that it is just like a New York Jets-esque disaster and you want nothing to do with it. So it's one of those spots I think you do want to take some sprinkles on, take some dabble, but you don't want to get too far out ahead of your skis with the Broncos.
Going to continue to be a situation we'll be monitoring closely throughout August and into the early portions of the season because, to Pete's point, everyone is really cheap, but yeah, right now it certainly seems a bit too spread out for our likings. Fantasy Life projections, which you can find with a Fantasy Life Plus membership, actually does not have a single Broncos player other than Courtland Sutton getting over 70 targets at this point in time. So Sutton just got that, extra little bump on his contract last week. He is probably the safest option right now, and accordingly, he is going earliest in drafts right there alongside Javonte Williams. All right, guys, another very ambiguous situation that we got a little bit of light shed on is this Cowboys backfield. So first of all, got word from Mike McCarthy just noting that he has this committee size, whether it's 2 or whether it's 3, to be honest with you, the players will determine that. And then specifically on Rico Dowdle, he's definitely one of the lead guys in the room. So not a ton of takeaways there, but McCarthy historically has been fairly forward with what he's talking about in terms of the depth chart. Coach Speak Index, which is a fantastic Twitter account follow. Make sure you guys, shoot them some love. Actually gives McCarthy a 90%, approval rate in terms of his offseason coach speak. On the other hand, a man who is known to maybe exaggerate and say a few crazy things in the media, Jerry Jones, a bit less, hidden in his praise for certain players. Specifically, Royce Freeman has, quote unquote, really impressed, mentioned him being a great 2 to 3 combination, and in specific words where he'll be a good addition and a great compliment to Zeke, and then we'll let these young guys between Rico Dowdle and Malik Davis and those guys battle it out. So, Pete, Royce Freeman, it is August, or it's not August yet. It's still the end of July. So even more, even better at my point I was trying to get to. Royce Freeman, someone that we saw get signed and we noted it, but certainly didn't expect him to be challenging Rico Dowdle, let alone Ezekiel Elliott for the top 2 spots in the depth chart. How worrying is this to you? Because, I don't know about you, man. I've drafted a good amount of Rico Dowdle there after, pick 130 or so.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I've drafted a lot of Rico. This situation is a lot different than Denver in that, yes, it's an ambiguous backfield, but we know there's going to be a ton of running back opportunities in here. Tony Pollard was second in the league, I think, in red zone opportunities last year, highly inefficient, but there are going to be points for the running back here. So whether it's Zeke, whether it's Dowdle, whether it's, an unmasked, running back who isn't on our radar right now, we want to be taking stabs here. I did think the quote, I believe it was from Stephen A. Jones, it kind of just seemed like him at a steakhouse, just kind of like spitballing about the team. And he kind of forgot to mention Rico with the backs, and then all of fantasy Twitter panicked. I'm with you right now. Like, we know who Zeke is. I think we're going to see a setup where Zeke is going to get high value touches. I think they trust him in pass protection, probably at the goal line. But if they need a guy to make sure that they're not in second and long and third and long, I think Rico has to be that guy getting those touches early on. He was really efficient last year. I think the one concern is, hey, Tony Pollard was really inefficient and they never fully expanded Rico's role. They were kind of stubbornly feeding Pollard. Are they going to be stubborn again, or are they going to let us see, can Rico maintain that efficiency on a larger workload?
Rico Dowdle, top 10 in yards per reception and yards per route run among qualified running backs last year. To Pete's point, yeah, he really did make the most out of his opportunities, but when he got Pollard soaking up 307 touches, obviously not too many extra to go around. So still very much does seem like Zeke is going to be the RB1 in Dallas, and at a minimum, he should have plenty of those goal line opportunities. Over these past 3 seasons, only the Lions, Colts, and Eagles, yes, the Eagles, tush push only happens at the 1-yard line. Only those teams actually have more RB carries inside the 5-yard line than the Cowboys. So that's kind of my thinking with Zeke. As much as he continues to be pushed down, kind of around that RB3 borderline, depending on where you're drafting. Last year, it's not like we saw Zeke fall off a cliff between 2022 and 2023. The Patriots offense sucked, don't get me wrong, but mainstream media won't tell you this, everyone, but Zeke actually hit a faster top speed than Tony Pollard last season. And no, the efficiency wasn't good, but efficiency wasn't very good for Josh Jacobs, wasn't very good for Saquon Barkley. But when they go to new and improved offenses, we get hyped about it, not so much with Ezekiel Elliott. So again, Pete, I'm not expecting Zeke to go in here and get those 300 plus touches or to be treated like the $90 million running back he was in Dallas. But man, double-digit touchdown upside is firmly on the table for a guy who, because of that pass pro, might end up surprising us in the receiving game. I'm not going out of my way for Zeke, but I think as a low-end RB3, man, the price is right.
I do too. And I often think about what does my team need? And I think Zeke has a spot on teams, and I think Rico has a spot on teams. If I have a really strong or, punt zero RB build, maybe I take Jonathan Brooks as my first running back. I'm not expecting Jonathan Brooks to give me much at the beginning of the season. I'm going to need some early season production. I think Zeke can offer that in spades. Say I have an earlier running back build where I have, a Breece Hall and I grabbed a Kenneth Walker. At that point, I want a little upside. I don't need the early season production. Let me have the more mystery box element of Rico Dowdle. And the other thing I'll say, specifically for best ball drafts, and I don't mind it for managed either, I think you can take both of these guys together. They're both cheap enough that you can say, hey, can I hit a triple by just picking both of these guys and then figuring out who is the winner here? Sure, it could be a committee, but I think the cost is cheap enough that you could take both and just find out.
Cowboys offense in points per game since 2020. Pre-Dak injury in 2020, they were second. In 2021, they were first. In 2022, post-Dak injury, they were first. And lo and behold, in 2023, first again. So haven't exactly reloaded. Hasn't been the all-in offseason that Jerry Jones talked about. But at the same time, their first-round offensive tackle, Tyler Guyton, getting rave reviews and actually holding up well against Micah freaking Parsons out there. So maybe Dak and company keep on keeping on. And if they do, Lord knows we're going to have at least one fantasy relevant to be had here in Dallas. But yeah, guys, got some notes on the 49ers. But first, a quick word on FantasyLife Plus. If you guys have been listening to us, you've heard us mention FantasyLife Plus a few times, but truly, guys, this is our best offering, is our premium offering to try to help you, a scholar, become a better fantasy football player. So guess what? All of our content, our newsletter, our written stuff, what you're listening to right now is free. And if that's all you want, great. We even have a draft kit that just launched online to help you with that very feature. But if you're trying to get some extra mocks in, you're trying to see all the rankings, all the projections, do some of your own research with our utilization hub, the FantasyLife Plus is the subscription for you. Again, can't say enough good things about our draft champions tool in particular, because I don't know about you guys, but my home league, it's 8-man. I know it's embarrassing, but I'm in it. I got to freaking win it one of these years. But it's very difficult because we have multiple quarterbacks, wonky scoring rules, a bunch of keepers. And honestly, I just haven't seen many other mock draft tools out there that allow you to customize things to the level that I need until, again, we were able to create this draft champion tool. So for that alone, I think it's worth the price of admission. And guess what? Our tier 2 package worth less than a Chipotle burrito per month. And we're not even talking double steak or guac, everybody. So check it out. FantasyLife Plus. Don't leave home without it. Don't leave home without it. We'll work on that tagline, Pete. It is an internet freaking thing after all. So I guess you can leave home and still have it. But regardless, we do have one other big news item wanted to go over. And it's an update on the 49ers backfield situation. Christian McCaffrey is fine, but guess what? It's July, so he's not getting many reps overall in 49ers training camp. Instead, we're looking at the battle between Elijah Mitchell and Jordan Mason. And I don't know about you, Pete, but I'll just say the quote first. Here's the quote from Kyle Shanahan. Nothing against Elijah. There's been no fall off in Elijah at all, but Jordan Mason runs at a very high level. He did a hell of a job for us last year. We'll see how camp plays out, but I love both of those guys. Now, some have interpreted this as Jordan Mason RB2 season, move over Elijah Mitchell. Is Elijah going to be traded? Is he going to be cut? I don't know, man. It sounds like Jordan Mason's doing a good job. It sounds like Jordan Mason could perhaps split this backfield a bit more than he did last year. But to me, Shanny said it himself. Nothing against Elijah. No fall off in Elijah. I still believe Elijah Mitchell is the RB2 and the handcuff to be had in San Francisco. But the question becomes, is he really a handcuff worth chasing? Because maybe it emerges into more of a 50-50 split. Lord knows when we have seen CMC miss time, not like they feature Elijah Mitchell in the passing game to the same extent. So overall thoughts on this quote, and if it's more of an actual sign of things to come, or just July coach speak with Kyle Shanahan saying good things about his running backs.
Yeah, it's another fun one to parse. I do agree with you. I don't think this means Jordan Mason has jumped Eli Mitchell, but I also do think it introduces a little bit of ambiguity. And another parallel was kind of what happened with CEH earlier this week, where we hear Deneric Prince has been getting some snaps there, could potentially be the RB2. You hear about Kadarius Toney mixing in. And the reason this is relevant is because we are often drafting CEH and Eli Mitchell, not because we think they are so good, but that they're the clear RB2 in a good offense. And that has value because that's saying, hey, if the starter goes down, as we saw last year, CEH was not good, but he turned in some RB1 weeks just because he's the guy. in an offense that's really good, and you don't have to be that talented to take advantage of it. So if we introduce, committee risk, or that they might not be the RB2, it makes them less comfy of selections. And if it's the case, I might want to push and be more aggressive with those late round running backs I'm taking. Like, hey, maybe I want to take a Will Shipley. Maybe I want to take a rookie who I think has the talent to maybe take advantage of an opportunity even more than these incumbents. So I would say I am filing this away as interesting, because we do need to know who the RB2 is on San Francisco.
And can't stress enough how much of a late round consideration this is. I mean, I'm looking at our ADP tool right now, and none of the guys we just mentioned, from CEH to Elijah Mitchell to definitely Jordan Mason, are dealing with an ADP, under 165. And for ESPN purposes, that is literally like the very last round. So something to keep in mind there. But the way I like to think about it is just like, if we did see this injury happen, would these guys be on the cover of the, weekly waiver wire magazine that comes out on Tuesday? And yeah, I think Elijah Mitchell would still be the front runner for that. But again, in terms of now, where would I go ahead and be ranking Elijah Mitchell? This is enough for me, combined with the performance last year where we did see Mason, I believe, eclipse 5 yards per carry. Mitchell was south of 4. Shanahan addressed that and said they look at more than stats, but clearly Shanahan is looking at more than stats right now, and he is liking what he's seeing from Jordan Mason. So again, we don't want CMC to leave the lineup at all, but if he does, maybe, just maybe, could be a bit closer between the guys. But sadly, Pete, it is San Francisco, and we've seen what Shanahan does sometimes when one of his guys get hurt, and that is focus the offense around others. I mean, maybe the answer is just Deebo Samuel getting 12 carries per game and breaking fantasy. Have we thought about that?
It definitely could be. And we've seen Shanahan has been incredibly finicky with his running back usage behind CMC over the years. They've also been notorious to burn running back picks on guys they get us excited about. They trade up. Do you remember the name Joe Williams? They trade up for Joe Williams.
Yes.
Tyrion Davis-Price was a guy a bunch of us were drafting a couple of years ago. Trey Sermon. Shanahan is not afraid to spend significant capital on one of these guys and then just discard them. So we do need to read the tea leaves. They also drafted one of the most athletic running backs to ever enter the league in Isaac Guerrero. That also muddies the waters a bit. He's injured right now, I heard. So I think I want to keep tabs on this, but man, Shanahan, he can break our heart, even if it seems like he's pointing in the direction of one guy or over the other.
Again, guys, those are the big 3 news items. But as Pete actually mentioned with Guerrero, we do have several other just smaller news tidbits that, as always, I'm going to run through right now before we get to our RB superlatives. So with that, guys, yes, 49ers rookie RB Isaac Guerrero continuing to deal with that hamstring injury. He will be out for several weeks, in fact. So certainly would not be drafting him as the projected 49ers handcuff, at least at this point in time. Meanwhile, Ricky Pearsall actually activated off the NFI list. Not, he was getting the Drewski comp with some of his separation out there. So maybe not the first best day at practice, but he is at least healthy and back out there on the field. Sadly, Rashad Bateman did leave practice early with an injury. However, John Harbaugh said his senses that it's not serious. A reporter said it was soreness, got hit in the stomach and ribs area. Juwan Johnson is quote unquote clearly progressing and getting a work after practice. Remains a pretty nice final round pick if you do need an extra tight end on the squad. Bills running back Ty Johnson did get banged up, which is important because Bills beat reporter Joe Biscalgia noted that Johnson has a slight edge over everyone's, not everyone, but a lot of people's favorite handcuff, Ray Davis. We'll talk more about that here in just a little bit. Also would note that Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been dealing with an illness over the last, couple of days and maybe even a week, has missed some practice, and perhaps that's why Generic Prince has been getting a bit more run than him. Finally, Chase Claypool is day-to-day with a toe injury for you sickos that still believe in the artist formerly known as Maple Jordan out there. Some depth chart notes. Packers OC Adam Stenovich noted that anytime you can have Josh Jacobs and A.J. Dillon, that's a pretty good 1-2 combination right there. We respectfully disagree, but yeah, guys, it is a good reminder that the Packers backfield might not be as simple as Josh Jacobs' workhorse season. Marshawn Lloyd continuing to work his way back from, I believe, a hip injury. Jacoby Brissett has taken all the starting reps during team periods. Heavy favorite to at least start week 1 over Drake May. Doug Peterson, for the second straight offseason, is believing in Tank Bigsby. Says he'll have a bigger role this year, specifically in short yardage situations. So not necessarily ideal for ETN, but then again, we've kind of seen what Tank Bigsby brings to the table at this point. Giants rookie, not phenom, but athletically gifted rookie tight end Theo Johnson got off the PUP list, and now he's actually allegedly catching up with Daniel Bellinger, getting a lot of first-team reps in practice. Something named Mason Tipton is emerging as a Saints star. Apparently, he is actually working ahead of A.T. Perry, and it seems like it's going to be Mason Tipton versus Cedric Wilson to have that last, coveted 3 wide receiver spot next to Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave. Eagles defensive back Avonte Maddox noted that the wide receivers are working a lot more out of the slot. Good news for most likely Devonta Smith, but also A.J. Brown. Dylan Lobb, thank you, YouTube comments, for correcting my always terrible pronunciation. Getting reps with the first-team offense as a third-down back. Shout out Davis Maddock, his #1 fan. Jordan Whittingham, not going to unseat Puka, Kupp, or D-Rob, but possible he's pulling ahead of Tutu Atwell. Final 2 notes, Nick Sirianni was wearing a Kenneth Gainwell shirt at his press conference. I think he did this last year. That man loves himself some Kenneth Gainwell. And the People's NFL Insider, Pretty Ricky, is saying the Cowboys are closing in on a 4-year extension with CeeDee Lamb worth between $136 and $138 million. And let me tell you what, the NFL Insiders are not happy with a dog with a Giants hat, pretty much stepping on their turf. We'll find out, but I'm Team Ricky. Let's go get that CeeDee Lamb extension, and we'll see what the numbers say. But that's the news, everyone. But now a quick word from our friends over at Mike's Hard Lemonade. Hey, Fantasy Life fans, let me ask you a question. Was your day hard enough for a Mike's Hard Lemonade? Are you in a slow draft that just won't end? Were you one pick away from the perfect quarterback wide receiver stack, but got sniped? I truly hate when that happens. Nothing tilts me more. Living the fantasy life is hard, and Mike's Hard Lemonade is a reward for a hard-earned thirst. Reward yourself today. Go to www.mikeshard.com to find out where you, a scholar, can get Mike's nearest you. Hard days deserve a hard lemonade. All right, Pete, it is RB week over here on the Fantasy Life Show. And accordingly, today we are talking RB superlatives. I got a 6-pack of questions where basically set them over to you and said, here's what I believe. I think you agree with 1 or 2. You got some other answers for yourself. And with that, man, let's freaking get after it. So first question, kind of looking at the RB landscape in Fantasyland ahead of 2024. Which running back is most likely to tell Father Time to F right off? I'm going to go with Ravens RB Derrick Henry because, again, I think when you do dig into his advanced stats a little bit more, yes, you see the yards per carry drop off during his time in Tennessee. 2 years ago, he had to miss those 8 or 9 games during the second half of the year. But, hey, the Titans are PFF's ranking 32nd ranked offensive line. Their yards before contact has gone from very strong to 30th in back-to-back years. And you look at the #1 team in football in yards before contact per carry over the last half decade, and it is indeed the Baltimore Ravens. So typically strong offensive line combined with the gravity that Lamar Jackson induces in the read option game. It should be a picture perfect setup for Derrick Henry. I mean, my God, I'm going to give Gus Edwards a lot of love. I think he is very underrated among the NFL masses, but when he scored 13 touchdowns and none of them were longer than 7 yards, yeah, it might have a little bit something to do with the system. So his top speed, I'm talking about Derrick Henry in 2023, was higher than anything he pulled off in 2019 and 2020. I mean, Pete, if there was going to be a running back that could keep playing well and normal into his 30s, it seems like probably the guy who continues to train like a maniac and is, more akin to a defensive lineman in terms of his size right there. Do you still believe in Derrick Henry?
Yeah, and I think if you were to try to offset age concerns, what would you cook up in the lab? One, you would have a guy who's a freak of nature who already has broken the mold of what we expect from a running back and what he can handle. And then on top of it, you would say, and let's also put him in the most conducive environment possible to make things easy for him. And what would that be? It would be playing alongside a really dynamic rushing quarterback that defenses have to account for. You can't stack the box when Lamar Jackson can get loose and crack off a big run. And on top of that, you would want him in a really good offense where there's a lot of gimmies, a ton of short yardage, goal line touchdowns. Well, guess what? Gus Edwards had as many gimmies as you can possibly imagine last year, and Derrick Henry is a much better player. So I think everything is set up for Derrick Henry to succeed. I think the only way he really fails is if he just runs poor on touchdowns. If there's a few more that get, vultured by Lamar, if they throw a little bit more, if their defense is really good again and they have a few pick sixes, like if he runs poor on touchdowns, maybe he doesn't pay off his price tag, but man, he is set up to succeed this year.
I know Dwayne McFarland yesterday was saying that when he does his projections, which he really is trying to be conservative with a lot of these and, just not exactly projecting the moon for any of these guys. But even he was struggling to just wrap his mind around a scenario where Henry doesn't reach the end zone double digit times in 2024. So going right around with, Kyron Williams, usually ESPN, Yahoo, more mid, late second, best ball land more in the third. But yes, you need an early round RB. I am confident that Henry is going to be able to return you some value, particularly in half PPR and standard. Pete, love your pick. James Conner, someone that continues to be written off by the fantasy just landscape as a whole. I mean, 2021, this dude was the RB 35 in preseason ADP, finishes RB 8. 2022, RB 15 ADP, finishes RB 9. Last year, RB 25 ADP, finishes RB 13. Right now, RB 23 ADP. Yes, they use a day 2 pick on Trey Benson, but I don't know, man. I think James Conner is just really good at football, and I'm not so sure we should just be assuming that's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, and I mean the big difference between him and Derrick Henry, you do have to pay a second, third round tag on Henry for that kind of juicy setup. With James Conner, you don't have to pay that. Like you just said, RB23, he is firmly in the pocket of 0 running back targets. Your Zamir Whites, your Ramondre Stevensons, your Raheem Mosterts. You are not having to pay a lot for what could just be a top 10 back. I mean, he was top 5 in all of the efficiency metrics last year. Some of these running backs, they did fall off of a cliff efficiency wise. And then you get concerned. You're like, can they recover here? Is this a bounce back thing? That's kind of what we're doing with Josh Jacobs right now. We're saying, can the environment, lead to better efficiency than he had last year? But with James Conner, you don't have to do that. He has been good. The only knock on James Conner has been his health. And I like Trey Benson a good bit, but if you read the reporting out of Arizona, they say this is James Conner's backfield. Trey Benson, it doesn't even sound like he's going to have a standalone role. This seems much more close to the Blake Corum with Kyron Williams situation, where he is an insurance policy. Arizona wants to play deep into the playoffs. They want to have an insurance policy if James Conner gets hurt. But until then, James Conner is running the show, and the fact that you can get him at these prices is incredible.
I know the Cardinals beat has been saying, like, if something happens to James Conner or next year in the future, Trey Benson is going to be their guy. But I also see that Amari DiMercato isn't letting go of his pass down role anytime soon. So, yeah, not exactly looking great for the rookie. Yes, we barely even gotten pads on at this point. I'm not writing off Trey Benson just yet. But, yeah, guys, James freaking Conner, as Pete said, top 5 in yards after contact per carry, missed tackles forced per carry, explosive run play rate. Like, I wonder, is it just because his speed is low in Madden is why, an entire generation is just acting like he's not an entertaining player? Watch the film. You see James Conner throwing Aaron Donald off him and getting, 4 or 5 yards. He's actually cutting back across field. Like, his problem is actually that his stuff rate, which is the amount of carries that you're stuffed at the line of scrimmage or behind, is actually one of the worst in the league. But I feel like most people would instead try to put Conner as more of that, it's like Zach Charbonnet, like it's more of like a boring running back who's going to take 4 yards when it's there. Really not the case, guys. And accordingly, James Conner continues to be really a dream pick, in the middle rounds for anyone trying to get that zero or hero RB strategy going in a major way. So I like that pick, Pete. And yeah, man, is he more injury prone than a normal running back? Yes, I do believe so. He's older in age. He has been hurt over the years, but we got to stop, making this either someone's completely injury prone or someone's not. And I really appreciate Draft Shark's injury prediction tool doing a good job of that. They give him a 88.4% chance of missing at least 2 quarters this year. Guess who's higher than that? Kyron Williams. Jonathan Taylor is at 65%. CMC is at 63%. Again, it's not as big of a difference as I think we make it to be. Don't purely hold injuries or inefficiency against one running back and then have it be nothing for another. So good stuff there. I'll give you the edge, Pete. I love James Conner. You freaking won in my own game. How about that? Next round, though, most likely to make up for bad efficiency with elite volume. I'm going to go with Texans RB1, Joe Mixon. Now, still not out there practicing for whatever reason. Not exactly sure what he's dealing with, but we have heard from Mixon himself and then also the Texans coaches that they fully plan on featuring him as the running back, y'all. And why wouldn't they be? Because, yes, he was only traded for, I believe, a 7th round pick when it happened, but the ensuing contract extension actually wound up giving Mixon more guaranteed money than even Josh Jacobs got with the Packers. So I know Mixon, again, isn't all that efficient. That's why he's in this category, but top 12 numbers in PPR points per game in 5 of the last 6 seasons, people. He's the only running back to pull that off in each of the last 3 years. He's managed to stay healthy the majority of his career, and now he's taken a role that gave Devin Singletary, who I'm pretty sure people don't exactly think is God's gift to the running back position. Yeah, he had the 4th most touches between weeks 9 and 18 last season in an offense that was one to feature him. So FantasyLife projections projections only have CMC, Brees Hall, Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, and Saquon Barkley projected to see more total work than Mixon. I'll admit, Pete, the round 3 price tag in redraft in some of these ESPN Yahoo leagues, that's tough for me because I do think we're getting closer to dead zone territory. But this is an offense that we wouldn't be surprised at all to see, putting up a top 5, number in terms of points per game. So don't love the RB3 price tag, but I also don't exactly see a huge, a very good reason why someone like Saquon is necessarily going rounds ahead of Joe Mixon.
Yeah, and I do think that's a good point, and it's something I've been writing about for Fantasy Life. I'm actually going to have another article out later this week looking at the most undervalued players on specific sites. And knowing which site you're playing on and where the values are is really important. And I know it sounds crazy to people. It's like a guy's either a good pick or a bad pick, but Joe Mixon is an incredible pick on Underdog. He often goes mid to late 6th round. It's just incredible value. But then, like you said, you maybe get in your home league and you're having to pass on some really, really good players to take Joe Mixon. So know where you're playing. But I do agree with you. We have seen Joe Mixon be an inefficient rusher in a really good offense in Cincinnati. Like, we don't have to imagine what this looks like. We know he's going to get a ton of high value touches at the goal line. We also know he can still rip off the occasional big play. He's going to have light boxes as teams have to account for the weaponry in the pass game in Houston. And I think if there's only any risk with him here, it's that the team was quick to move on from Dameon Pierce last year when he was really efficient. And they said, look, Devin Singletary, we're not going to be, have a sunk cost fallacy with Dameon Pierce. We were very hyped on him. He's just not it. But they gave Joe Mixon a decent amount of money. They're going to give him a shot at this. And if you're at least doing it on Underdog, you don't have to pay a lot of money to find out if he can take advantage of those opportunities.
28 at this point, so Mixon not exactly a spring chicken out there, but also not exactly at the age where we fully expect him to fall off, the proverbial age cliff. So great note on just the kind of different site ADP, and I'm looking at our ADP tool right now. Mixon on ESPN, pick 33. Don't love that. On Sleeper, pick 47. Maybe in your room he falls into round 5. So again, don't hate the player, hate the ADP, and Joe Mixon, depending on the site, does look pretty nice. Now, Pete, you want to talk about someone who I've been fading throughout this offseason, but I see the path to success and I've been vocal about it. And when I'm vocal about stuff, it tends to freaking, just kick me in the ass eventually. So tell the people why I'm wrong about Zamir White.
I'm kind of with you too. Like, he scares me every time I click him. But again, he's going in that same range as the James Conner type we just mentioned. So it isn't, a prohibitive cost. And the thing I keep coming back to, the Raiders could be a very bad team. They could be, one of the worst teams in the league. That's well within the range of outcomes. But we also saw how this team operates under the new coach, Antonio Pierce, and he wants to establish it on the ground. He knows he doesn't have elite quarterback play. He's not going to force, an aerial attack. These were the carries for Zamir White down the stretch last year when he took over 17, 22, 20, and 25 carries. They ended up getting 3 wins over that stretch as well. The counter is saying, all right, what if they aren't winning? What if they're in all of these negative game scripts and they can't pound the rock? My thought is they are going to keep going to it. They don't really have any other choice if they're not getting good quarterback play. And so we used to have to pay a premium for this kind of volume. I always remember the example of Mike Davis, when he was ended up in Atlanta and everyone's like, he's going to get 20 carries a game. I don't know what to tell you. And then he ended up being a bust, but that was a 4th and 5th round pick. This is an 8th, 9th round pick at times that you're paying for Zamir White. So I think a lot of that risk is almost baked out of it, in the volume is going to be there. I love Dylan Lobb, who you just mentioned as well, but he's a pass catching specialist. Alexander Madison, we know what that is. Zamir White is a far, far better rusher. So he has such a wide moat. I don't think anyone is stealing carries away from him.
Wide moat. I like that call out. But look, even though there are guys, David Montgomery has similar costs. I'm taking, the Lions running back there, even going further down the line. I think Jalen Warren, Jonathan Brooks have a bit more upside, but I kind of got into trouble with this last year. Okay. Like, putting aside about being wrong on Darren Waller, I just was ignoring some of the earlier round tight ends because my belief was that I could get, the same value later. So why would I pay more of a premium? But there is a thing, Pete, called a guy being priced right. And maybe Zamir White going, in freaking round 7 of a lot of these drafts, maybe the price is right for him right there. So yeah, I have not felt very good about clicking the name, but it also wouldn't be, that big of a shock if we look up after week 1 and the guy's got 20 plus combined carries and targets. So just comes down to this offense probably being terrible, but again, probably priced in, and to Pete's point, not exactly a dead zone running back when you are getting him this late in drafts. So, what I need to do, Pete, is just draft Zamir White in my home league. But that way, if I'm wrong to everyone in the world, at least I'll be right to my friends. So usually my solution there when I just have some fades that I'm not feeling great about, but good stuff there. Now, let's talk about a Titans backfield that's also been really a haven for zero RB drafters, because not a guy is even going inside the top 100 picks necessarily, depending on the draft room you're in. I'm talking about the Titans. So, Pete, we'll start with you. Most likely to emerge as the running back, y'all, in Tennessee, Tony Pollard or Tajay Spears, who you've been drafting more of?
Man, this one is putting me to the test, because I did an article for FantasyLife a few weeks ago of my favorite backfields to stack, where I was open to taking both of them. And I do think this Tennessee backfield is the epitome of a backfield you should be willing to take stabs on both guys. You listen to the rhetoric out of the team. They want to use these guys interchangeably. I know Tony Pollard got a little pigeonholed into being more of an early down rusher than he was in his, early part of his career with Dallas, but this guy can catch the ball. He can still be explosive. He's another year removed from that injury. My heart of hearts is that buying the dip on Tony Pollard is the preferred way to play it. I generally tend to chase the Tajay Spears types. I get so excited about that efficiency. His evasion rate for breaking tackles was off the charts. Sometimes I like wish cast a much larger role on those guys. I think the best bet is Tony Pollard, but not by much. And I'm open to taking both of these guys.
And we have heard, constant drumbeat throughout the offseason that they kind of view both as interchangeable. 1A, 1B has been thrown around a lot. And it seems like in practice, yeah, they do trust Pollard and Spears to more or less take the same reps out there. So I'm with you. I do, believe that Pollard is the superior player when things are right. And again, if we do want to go through this and say, well, Josh Jacobs was just in a bad situation last year, his piss poor efficiency is going to turn around. He's going to be like the guy he was, before 2023. Can't exactly use the bad situation tag as much on Tony Pollard being in the league's reigning number 1 ranked scoring offense. But to be fair, he was coming off that, ankle injury, and he said he started to feel better, week 11. Yes, everyone, the infamous Dolphins screenshot where he couldn't score from the 1 yard line did happen after Pollard said he was feeling better. So not so sure the tape matches what Pollard was telling us. But again, over 21 million reasons why he probably should be getting more reps than not in this Titans backfield. Yes, I am with you, man. I do think that he will be the guy. And yeah, dead last and expected PPR points per game below expectation last year either means you're really bad or you were just maybe a bit unlucky. Hopefully it is going to be a bit more of the latter. But Pete, do you want to talk about Chase Brown a little bit here too? Because it does seem like, a similar archetype here where we're getting an explosive pass catching running back, but just a few questions about, how capable they're going to be about getting more of that early down work.
Yeah, I think that the Browns are very analogous to the Titans and to the Cowboys.
Chase Brown.
There's these ambiguous
Chase Brown, sorry.
Yeah, Chase Brown. It's weird because I know everyone wants you to have like a hard take, like you got to take this guy. This is the winner in the backfield. But we see how NFL backfields are evolving and players have specific roles, their committees. There are so few backs that are going to be the CMCs, the Bijans, the Breece Halls, who are going to get 25 plus touches and do it everything. The rest of these teams are divvying it up, and then they are priced accordingly. And what we're actually looking for is the perfect storm, a la the Miami Dolphins last year, where the offense is potent and the efficiency and the goal line are opportunities there. And someone like Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane can smash in tandem. And they were both double-digit picks because of the ambiguity. And I think the Bengals might be my favorite bet for this. Like my bold take, my hot take of the year is that Chase Brown is going to be this year's Devon Achane and Zach Moss is going to be this year's Raheem Mostert. A ton of short yardage bunnies for Zach Moss, and Chase Brown is going to have the efficiency, the big plays, and that this offense is just going to cook on the ground. And I think the selling point too is if we can avoid a third back in the mix. Please don't, Broncos cut Samaje Perine and sign him. We're done with the Zach Evans and the Travion Williams stuff. If it's just these two guys in this offense that I expect to be very good, I think there's going to be a ton of running back points. The latest news item is it's kind of flipped to how ADP in the market was thinking about it, that Zach Moss was the lead back. They're saying that Chase Brown has been running with the ones. I think how this shakes out is they have Chase Brown on the early downs. Like, don't get us in those second and longs, those third and longs. Let's let you crack off some plays. And then we'll bring Zach Moss in pass protection. We trust him there. He'll probably get some goal line carries. So if you have Chase Brown's efficiency, you have Zach Moss as the high value touch guy, I think both of these guys can feast.
Maybe could be similar to the Montgomery Gibbs dynamic going on in Detroit too, where if we see one of the guys go down, I mean, I think both Moss, we saw it with Moss last year when Jonathan Taylor was out, and Chase Brown, if you just haven't seen it at the NFL level, but was racking up carries at Illinois, is not, a small pint-sized scat back by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, both these guys could legit have that RB1 upside should another go down with an injury. So you mentioned them becoming this year's Mostert HM. Doesn't happen very often, but over the past, decade of action, we saw the 2017 Saints with Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram, and then last year's Dolphins with Mostert and Achane, only offenses with 2 top 12 running backs in PPR points per game in the same season. So top 24s happen a little bit more frequently. 1.9 backfields per year on average are able to pull that off. And guess what? Neither of these guys even cost a top 24 pick. So it seems certainly like a good situation to buy someone closer to their floor than their ceiling. And also maybe a good situation to take some business over the DraftKings Sportsbook. Whether you've been watching your favorite team from the screen at home or the ballpark in the stands, there's an even better way to get on the action. Check out our partners at DraftKings Sportsbook. New customers who bet just $5 will instantly get $150 back in bonus bets. And again, guys, MLB home run parlays are always a good time to pass away a rainy afternoon. Well, not too rainy, baseball refuses to play through the bad conditions, but you know what I mean. But more importantly, getting on the action with some UFC bets on the weekend is one of my favorite ways to spend some time. And we have a free card this Saturday. It's going to be on ABC main card going off at 3 p.m. It's in Abu Dhabi, so they always got to show the Saudis a good time out there. And the main event, absolute banger between Corey Sandhagen and Umar Nurmagomedov, cousin of the great Khabib. Yes, Umar is undefeated, but Corey Sandhagen, no joke, man, at the top of this bantamweight division for quite some time, and I am looking forward to getting him at plus odds. So Corey Sandhagen, that's the pick to click. And yeah, guys, again, go over to DraftKings Sportsbook, use our code FantasyLife, bet just $5, and instantly get $150 back in bonus bets. All you gotta do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Again, use our code FantasyLife, and remember, the crown is yours. All right, Pete, 3 more superlatives we want to get to on this edition of the Fantasy Life Show. And feel free to like and subscribe if you guys want to. It's a free country, though, so do truly whatever the hell you want. But yeah, most likely non-Miami backup. So we're just, excluding Devin Achane or Raheem Mostert, however you see that situation. But non-Miami backup, AFC East running back to emerge as a league winner. And lo and behold, Pete, we got the same guy. Let's talk about Ray Davis a little bit.
I thought this prompt was so hyper specific. I was like trying to see if I could come up with a contrarian option. I'm like, can I do Antonio Gibson? No. I'm like, Braylon Allen isn't. I was like, no, it is Ray Davis. Like, if we look at the running backs here, and if we're ruling out, the Dolphins, I think it's obviously Ray Davis. And traditionally, I like making bets against those dead zone running backs. I think James Cook is a really good player, but they have constantly looked to find a complement for him in this offense. Last year they were doing Latavius Murray. They had signed Leonard Fournette for a spell. They are willing to give goal line carries in some of these high value touches to a non-James Cook running back. They just like using him between the 20s. That's what they've done. Doesn't mean that James Cook can't pay it off, but it means that there's room for both standalone value. Ray Davis could have a role right out of the gate. And if James Cook gets injured, you're looking at a bell cow back potentially in one of the best offenses in football.
And look, James Cook, he does have some nice advanced rushing numbers, but I just think that a lot of them are being inflated by the light boxes he faces. I mean, just 10.1% of his carries did come with 8 or more defenders in the box last year. I've talked at length about him dropping not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 different touchdowns. He's been in the McDermott doghouse from fumbling the football already. I mean, if there is a coach out there that we could see yanking his starter off the field, I mean, he already did it last year with James Cook, so wouldn't be the most shocking thing to see that happen again. So yes, it is risky betting on, day 3 running backs. But when we have someone and we need several factors to, crack in their direction in order for things to work out, above all else at running back, you just want that theoretical 3-down upside. And Ray Davis has it in spades. I mean, Very compact player, 5'8", 211 pounds. Shot up player profiler. That's good for an 88th percentile BMI. Ty Johnson's only at 35th percentile. James Cook is at 10th percentile. I mean, Latavius Murray last year was one of 13 running backs with double-digit carries inside the 5-yard line. As much as Josh Allen got his touchdowns there too, it's a really good offense. So guess what? They even had some more carries to spare more times than not. So I think there's a chance Ray Davis actually gets a short yardage role. And Pete, if you guys have been paying attention to the Bills training camp notes, he's really been impressing as a pass catcher as well. And over these past 2 years in college, 6.8 PPR points per game from just receiving. Only Bucky Irving actually averaged more than that among most of the main draft eligible running backs. I think Dylan Lobb, had more, but you play at New Hampshire, bro. I'm not going to give you credit for that. So overall, Dane Brugler talking about Ray Davis and his phenomenal, the beast, actually said his performance against Florida last season was maybe the best RB tape, like single game performance in the class. So similar to Michael Penix Jr., going up against Texas, CJ Stroud against Georgia from a couple years ago, where you have a guy that at his best has looked like one of the best running backs, in this draft class. Again, at his best, older, played at 3 schools. Look, he was a 5th-round pick for a reason. But again, Pete, seeing where he's going right now, next to a bunch of other guys that are clear backups, I think Ray Davis has a lot more outs than your typical 5th-round rookie running back.
Yeah, I did a video a couple weeks ago on my favorite pick in every round, and Ray Davis was one of my late round picks. Obviously, it goes at different spots depending on which site you're playing on, but I think that blend of the standalone and contingent upside is just awesome. And the other thing about Ray Davis, we don't have to worry about him being good in that he rushed for over 1,000 yards at 3 different colleges. He played at 3 different colleges, was an immediate workhorse almost everywhere he went. And to your point, I keep seeing my feed as well. And every single day I log on to Twitter, he is making some kind of play out of the backfield, which isn't even necessarily the role I think I envisioned for him when they drafted him. I thought short yardage, bruiser back, goal line, like you said. So if he is adding this versatile skill set here and the Bills are open to it, I mean, there's so many outs to fantasy relevancy.
And hey, guys, again, this is a situation where could we see Curtis Samuel just be the wide receiver 1 and RB 1? No, surely my Columbus homerism isn't getting in the way here. But again, a lot of different players going on. I do agree with the idea that, it could be more of a committee approach than past years where Stephon Diggs was just kind of the engine of the offense. But yeah, accordingly, maybe taking a chance of some of the cheaper options a la Ray Davis makes a lot of sense in fantasy drafts of most shapes and sizes. 2 more superlatives, everyone. Most likely starter to have their job snatched by the backup at some point. Shout out Miles Sanders from last year. Pete, I'm going to go with Kenneth Walker, Seahawks RB1. And it's tough because we see the talent from the guy. If you want to just make a running backs, 1 minute highlights, who has the most dope runs, like Kenneth Walker is going to be up there. But I just don't know if this rushing style is exactly conducive to every coach out there. It's a new coaching staff. We had Zach Charbonnet behind him who, Pick your stat, man. Explosive runs, yards after contact per carry, stuff rate, yards over expected per carry. Like Charbonnet was the more efficient running back than Kenneth Walker last year. Smaller sample, which does matter, but again, don't think he's a jag. They both had similar, draft capital coming out, and a new coaching staff. I think this could honestly be a bit more 1A, 1B than their fantasy ADP is indicating right now, with Walker being really, a round 4 guy in a lot of redraft sites, and Charbonnet being in the handcuff tier. And honestly, again, I just wonder if Charbonnet could actually be the better overall fit in this new offense. The type of running back who takes the 4 yards when it's there, doesn't, reverse field and try to hit a home run every single time he's out there. So whereas, we actually saw Chuba Hubbard hilariously relegate Miles Sanders to a pure bench job, I don't see Kenneth Walker going away, but I could see Charbonnet being the lead early down back at a minimum, and Walker being a bit more of a change of pace option than we're used to. So, AKA, I love Charbonnet as a prospective handcuff and someone that could, again, provide that standalone value, the awesome flex with benefits, running back option. Walker, I do think, is someone I've been really staying away from. So, Pete, you agree with me here to an extent?
Yeah, I do think the biggest point you made that I think is a huge variable is this new coaching staff. And we don't know how they are going to view these two backs. Kenneth Walker serves a purpose. He's a home run hitter. I actually love Kenneth Walker in best ball. I think from a managed perspective, it's like, man, when do I know if he's going to hit this home run? But yeah, I think Zach Charbonnet is an awesome pick. I mentioned my favorite pick in every round. Zach Charbonnet was one of the other guys there in that 11th, 12th round range, because I do think you're getting those outs that we were just talking about with Ray Davis. He could have a bigger standalone role than expected. Maybe this new coaching staff wants him on pass down, wants him near the goal line. They trust him more. And then the contingent upside. There is one backfield we have seen the contingent upside theory play out year after year. First, Chris Carson went down. Rashad Penny went nuclear. Rashad Penny just retired minutes ago. Breaking news, by the way. Rest in peace, Rashad Penny. Then we saw Rashad Penny get hurt, and Kenneth Walker was a monster down the stretch. So I will say this. I mean, whichever one of these guys is the back, and generally you want to play it through the cheaper piece. If Kenneth Walker were to go down, we already know what it looks like when Zach Charbonnet gets some spot starts. He had an awesome game against the 49ers, an awesome game against the Cowboys, 2 stiff defenses last year. He'd be a weekly top 10 back if Kenneth Walker got hurt.
And vice versa could also be true if Charbonnet leaves the picture. Yes, it does seem like it's Kenneth Walker's backfield to be had. But yeah, guys, truly, when you have these 3 down capable running backs who maybe have the new coaching staff a bit more of an ambiguous situation than we're giving credit for, those are the names I love clicking, especially at the point of the draft where, again, you're not exactly dealing with high-end talents at the other position anymore. So takes us to our final question, Pete. Most likely sub 150 underdog ADP running back to rise into the top 130 by September. I'm going to take, a little bit of a cheap way out. Almost everyone's favorite sleeper, at least before the last couple of days, Kamani Vidal, and it's more of just an indictment on this overall depth situation with the Chargers. An offense we expect to run the ball, but it's hobbled because Gus Edwards had an offseason surgery that Harbaugh won't tell us the logistics of. J.K. Dobbins coming back from the Achilles a year after having a bad ACL tear. And Kamani, again, I've said it a million times already, but I'll say it again, theoretical 3-down ability, 5'8", 213 pounds, had 92 catches for 700 receiving yards during his time at Troy, and the man can fly. So thin depth chart, that's what we look for when we do expect a day 3 rookie to break the mold. So I'm going with Kamani. Pete, you have an even cheaper option, though. One, Audric Estime.
Yeah, it feels fitting. We started the show talking about ambiguity with the Broncos and knowing that there's a wide range of outcomes here. I think Audric Estime fits the bill of a guy that I could see as a riser. I know people are very nervous about Javonte Williams. He was in the doghouse initially, some of the reports where he might be fighting for a roster spot. That's kind of been debunked at this point. But we know Sean Payton is going to be finicky with these running backs. Audric Estime was his guy. They continue to rave about him. I think at the very least, Audric Estime is going to have a short yardage role on this team, could be the goal line back. And there could be room for more here as Sean Payton just plays favorites if Javonte Williams falls out of favor. And to me, I see how the market and people react to this backfield. People like Jaleel McLaughlin, but they also kind of view him more pigeonholed as a specific role. If the market sours on Javonte, Audric Estime is going to be the beneficiary. And I mean, look at last year. People push Tank Bigsby way up drafts because they're like, he could be the guy. What if he usurps, Travis Etienne? I mean, Javonte Williams is less of a speed bump than Travis Etienne was for Tank. So I could see people getting really hype on Estime down the stretch.
I know Estime profiles more as the early down grinder, but hey guys, that was Javonte last year and he still found a way to get 50 plus targets. Broncos, fourth most expected PPR points per game in the NFL last year, despite having a bad offense. Audric Estime certainly plenty of room to rise. So thank you, Pete. Great stuff, my friend. Make sure you guys go subscribe to Pete's own YouTube page and here as well. Why not, after all? So thank you guys again for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow, every day of the week, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern on the Fantasy Life show. Mock draft season with Chris Allen going through some different strategy at the running back position, 0 RB, hero RB, all that and so much more. So for producer Matt, for Pete, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in to Fantasy Life show. And until next time, take care, everybody.